Happy Tuesday, everybody. It is Tuesday night team training with Essential Healthy Lifers, and we are starting on John C. Maxwell's book, The 15 Invaluable Laws of Growth this week. And we have covered several different books. If you want to check any of that out, it is on the essentialhealthylife.com website for you to access anytime that you want. All of these calls are recorded, and then we stick them up there for you, and there's lots of good information. If you don't have the book, you can still listen to the calls, no problem whatsoever, because we go over all the important stuff and talk about it together and learn together. So we're going to be talking about the 15 invaluable laws of growth. So tonight is Chapter 1. It is the law of intentionality. Growth doesn't just happen. So, and the title says, Life is now in session. Are you present? I like that. So I'm going to go on and skip. If you're with me, I'm skipping to page 2. I did leave a link to the entire book, a PDF. I'm not even sure if that's legal, but I stuck it on there anyway. So, hey, listen, it's on the internet. So that you can read through it if you want. I highly suggest that you do, because the brain just will process things. It'll help you remember. At least it does me if I read things. So I'm going to skip to page 2 where it talks about growth gap traps. And I like John C. Maxwell. We were just talking about that. He's very to the point, but there's a lot of good stuff in this first chapter. So he's talking about growth gap traps. And he says, if you have dreams, goals, or aspirations, you need to grow to achieve them. And I'm pretty sure all of us on here know that. That's what we're on here for. And he says, but if you're like I was, and if you're like most people, which this is true, if you're like most people, you have one or more mistaken beliefs. Hang on, let me make sure I'm turn this sound.
Entry and exit chimes are off.
You have one or more mistaken beliefs that create a gap that keeps you from growing and reaching your potential. So there are 8 misconceptions about growth, and I had some of these. Oh, that's okay, Don. It's no biggie. I had some of these. If sometimes it's just stuff that you grow up with, things that you're taught, from your family or your friends, maybe even your church. It kind of just depends. But you can, people tend to pass on their beliefs, and sometimes their beliefs aren't always the truth. And so we have to unlearn some things and learn to think differently. And something, the whole time I'm reading this, the thing that I'm thinking about is poverty mentality. If you've never researched that, make sure to put that on your list of things to like Google. If you're like me, I have a list of stuff I want to research all the time. And I learned a lot about poverty mentality that really set me free and changed the way I think about a lot of stuff. And it's changed who I am and the way I live my life and the way I look at things. And it's just something I said, it would go right along with this. So poverty mentality, like YouTube it, Google it, there's lots of information out there. And we'll talk about it later on too. So the first one, so he talks about 8 misconceptions. The first one is the assumption gap. So I assume that I will automatically grow. So you just think that, as time goes by, you're going to get better at life and at who you are. You're just going to grow. But the problem is that we don't improve by simply living. So you have to be intentional about it. Because if I know, you can look in your life and you probably know right now a list of 5 people who are the same that they've always been. You've never seen them, challenge themselves or grow or change the way they think about things. And maybe you've outgrown them. And you can really see it. The more you grow, you'll see other people and you'll be able to recognize, people kind of where they are in their journey. And so it's, it's an intentional thing. If you never put any effort into it, then you're not going to grow as a person. You're not going to learn things. A lot of people stop learning when they get out of high school. And that's really sad, because you have a whole lifetime. Like, it's been forever, I feel like, since I've been in high school. I'm not even going to say how many years it was. We ain't going to admit to that. I mean, it was just like last year, but I feel like it's been like 20-something years. And so, because I'm really young, I'm only 21. Well, I guess I would be 19 if high school was last year. I'm just kidding. Anyway, so we don't just get better. We have to make an effort. So that is, and he says, no one improves by accident. Number 2 is the knowledge gap. And it's I don't know how to grow, which was one that I had, because I used to think I loved school and I loved learning. And then you get out and you think, okay, so what do I do now? Like, how do I stretch myself now? And when I first got into network marketing, they kept talking about personal development. I thought, what is that? Like I kept looking into it and I thought, but how does that work? And it's hard because it's hard to explain it to somebody because until you start to, get around people that are doing personal development, other people that you can talk with about it. And, you start reading things and looking at things to help yourself grow, then you understand what it's about. It's not always really easy for people that aren't doing it to, like, they get overwhelmed. And so they just don't do anything because they think, well, gosh, I don't know where to start. He says, many people learn only from the school of hard knocks. Difficult experiences teach them lessons the hard way, and they change, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. The lessons are random and difficult. It is much better to, and I agree with this, to plan your growth intentionally. I would rather learn of my own choice than to have to learn from the school of hard knocks. You decide where you need or want to grow. You choose what you will learn, and you follow through with discipline, going at the pace you set. So I really like that. Then the third one is the timing gap. It's not the right time to begin. You hear that a lot as an objection for our business as well, and even for our products sometimes. So he says, most people don't act as quickly as they should on things. They find themselves subject to the law of diminishing intent, which says the longer you wait to do something you should do now, the greater the odds that you will never actually do it. So there's never going to be a right time. If you're looking for an excuse, basically, you'll find one at any time in your life. And you guys know that. I know that you already know that. He says, now's the time to start growing. And there's a quote he gives, life lived for tomorrow will always be a day away from being realized. The reality is that you will never get much done unless you go ahead and do it before you are ready. And that's like, when people begin the business, they can get very overwhelmed because they think they can look at you. And let's say you've been doing this business for a couple of years or for a year, whatever it is. You're going to be probably doing more than they can start out doing. You may have a blog. You're probably going to be on social media. You're probably going to be doing classes, however you do them. And sometimes that's intimidating because they think, okay, well, I'm not ready. I got to, sometimes people say, I got to learn all I can about the oils first. No, you don't. You just share your experiences because you're never going to know all there is to know about the oils. So basically he's just saying, don't let that be a mistake that you make. You have to you just have to do it. Like I just jumped into, that's Amanda right now. Yeah. And it's several people on our team. And it's like, because we are growing, we're really growing. And it's like, I can understand it because I was that way, but I also learned that you just do a little bit at a time. Like I built my website and it took me all summer one year to do it, but I did it a little bit at a time. I learned how to do each thing. And I learned that if you do just a step at a time, one thing each day to get you closer to where you want to go, then eventually it all adds up. I started with one post on my Facebook. I started with one post on my blog. I didn't know what the crap I was doing. I had no clue. I'm like, I don't know how to build a website, but I do know I can learn. I can learn anything. If I put my mind to it, I will figure it out. It might drive me crazy. I might yell. I might throw the computer. No, not really. I might want to. So you just have to go on and do it. And then you figure it out as you go. So number 4 is the mistake gap. I'm afraid of making mistakes. This is a big one. This is a big one for me because I'm a perfectionist. I no longer have this one. I have outgrown this because I know I'm going to make mistakes. And the point is, you learn from your mistakes. That's how you remember things more if you learn by making a mistake. You just do. And that's part of our journey in life and as people, not just in your business. But he says growing can be a messy business. It means admitting that you don't have all the answers. It requires making mistakes. It can make you look foolish. Most people don't enjoy that. But that is the price of admission if you want to improve. Like, we don't like to be wrong. I mean, especially us women, we don't like to be wrong. And we don't like, I mean, making mistakes is not always fun, but if you learn from it and you grow from it, then it's a mistake that's worth making. And believe me, I've made plenty. So, and he says to become intentional about growing, expect to make mistakes every day and welcome them as a sign that you're moving in the right direction because you're learning. The number 5 is the perfection gap. This has got me written all over it. I have to find the best way before I start. I was in analysis paralysis. Like I just thought I'm that type of person. I feel like I need to research. And sometimes that'll stop me from taking action. But I have grown a lot with that. He says, it's a desire to find the best way to get started in a growth plan. But what I discovered is that I had it backward. I had to get started if I wanted to find the best way. It works kind of opposite of what you think. It's similar to driving on an unfamiliar road at night. Ideally, you'd like to be able to see your whole route before you begin, but you see it progressively as you move forward. A little more of the road is revealed to you. I thought that was a really good analogy. If you want to see more of the way, then you have to get moving. Number 6 is the inspiration gap. I just don't feel like doing it. And I know motivation can be hard, especially when you're first starting and your paycheck really isn't a motivation yet. It does become one, I promise you. Every month, if you're taking action and you're being consistent, that paycheck, if you're into making money, and we all are, we want to help people, we want to do good things, but we also want to make money. We want to provide for our families. That's what we're doing. And so, that can become a big motivator when you start to see success really in different forms. Like you see your team growing, you see your check growing, you see, people learn to use the oils and they're seeing success and they tell you about it and they're excited. That's really fun. He says motivation is not going to strike you like lightning. And motivation is not something that someone else can bestow or force on you. Like nobody can make you be motivated. You all know that. You have to dig down and figure out what's going to motivate you. For me, my vision board and my vision book every day and knowing my why, being very clear on the goals I want. I'm very goal oriented. Whatever that is for you to help you on the days when you just don't want to do it, you've got to find inspiration. The whole idea of motivation is a trap. Forget motivation, just do it, he says. Do it without motivation, and then guess what? After you start doing the thing, that's when motivation comes, and it makes it easy for you to keep on doing. Motivation is like love and happiness. It's a byproduct. And he said he had thousands and thousands of reasons not to do his personal growth. He didn't have the time, because sometimes it's hard to find the time to sit down for 20 or 30 minutes every day. That's why I do it in the morning. He didn't have the money. He didn't have the experience. We all know you can find excuses to not do anything. He says to start and stick with it for at least 12 months. So do it even when you don't feel like doing it, because you're still moving yourself forward. I mean, there are days when I don't want to do anything. Like today was one of those days I didn't feel good, but I push myself. I do have a list every day of things I want to get done. And I try very hard to make it a point to do, 3 things off that list a day. Now I may have a list of 10 that I really want to get done. But if I can do one thing for my business, one thing for my health, and one thing for my homeschool, that to me it motivates me. So you got to find motivation to do your personal development. Number 7, the comparison gap. Others are better than I am. So, you know how it is. Comparison is the thief of joy. You got to stay in your own lane and look at, compare. If you're going to compare things, compare yourself a year ago to yourself now. Don't look at other people. You got to get over the comparison gap. Don't even go there. Just don't even compare yourself to other people at all. I do it sometimes too, and it makes you feel like crap. It makes you feel frustrated. It makes you feel bad about yourself. It makes you, grumpy. So just don't even do it. Look at how far you yourself have come. You're the only one living your life. You're the only one on the journey that you are particularly on right now, and you're where you're supposed to be. Number 8 is the expectation gap. I thought it would be easier than this. I could say that about several things. So he says, I don't know any successful person who thinks growth comes quickly and climbing to the top is easy. And I'm on page 9, by the way. It just doesn't happen. People create their own luck. And he gives this formula. Preparation plus attitude plus opportunity plus action equals luck. So he says preparation, which is growth, attitude, opportunity, and action, which is doing something about it. Hey, Oscar. Hold on a second. My dog is... Lay down right now. Stop. He's not staying in here with me next week. So doing something about it is luck. So it's really not luck. It's taking action, basically. And he says it all starts with preparation. Unfortunately, that takes time. But the best news is what Jim Rohn said. You cannot change your destination overnight. I really love this. You cannot change your destination overnight, but you can change your direction overnight. I thought that was really good. Like, that made it more doable. So you cannot change your destination overnight, but you can change your direction, which that's really true. That was like a little truth bomb. And then on page 10, making the transition to intentional growth. The sooner you make the transition to becoming intentional, so you start doing it on purpose, about your personal growth, the better it will be for you, because growth compounds and accelerates if you remain intentional about it. So he talks about how to make the change. So number 1 is ask the big question now. And he said, he used to ask himself, how long will this take? Because we tend to do that. Well, how long is it going to take? To how far can I go? And that's the question you should be asking yourself, not right now. Not that you'll be able to answer it. But stop putting time constraints on things, because that just makes you feel pressured. But start looking at, how far can I go? And it's farther than you think you can anyway. But it helps you set the direction, if not the distance. So he asks questions like, and I journaled these down, by the way. And I'm going to tell you, writing stuff out like this is really powerful. Like, it will help you to remember it. It's going to make you have to come up with an answer, because you know how you read books sometimes and they'll ask a question and you don't really sit there and answer it. So that's why I told you guys to get a notebook. I wrote down answers. Let's see. I wrote these out right here. He says, where do you want to go in life? Because that's kind of a big question. I'm actually reading another book that goes right along with this that we really need to do together. And I posted it, Praying Circles, The Circle Maker. That's what it's called, The Circle Maker. And it talks about, it's a lot about prayer, but it also talks about how do you define success? And we can really get into that. I'm going to be teaching on that a lot on Periscope and Facebook Live, but we can certainly do it here, because I'm going to tell y'all something. That's a book that has really got me excited too. I'm reading 2 things at one time, trying to keep my mind straight. But answering these questions is beneficial to you. And even if you write them out and go back and answer them, the next day, you're thinking about them. So where do you want to go in life? Be really specific too. Don't just go, well, I want to be rich. I want to, whatever. I want to be crown diamond, whatever it is. Be more specific. And then he says, what direction do you want to go? What's the farthest you can imagine going? And I guarantee you that question, your answer to that will change as you grow. You're going to see yourself going farther and farther. The best that you can hope to do in life is to make the most out of whatever you've been given. I'm telling y'all, it's like I'm reading the same book, but one of them is from more of a faith-driven perspective, whereas this one is a little less. I mean, he's got faith in this book, but that book's about prayer, and they go right together. It's not a coincidence. You do that by investing in yourself, making yourself the best you can be. The more you've got to work with, the greater your potential and the farther you should try to go. So investing in yourself is important, like buying books or whatever you can at the time to learn how to do things is so worth the investment, because you'll grow from it and then your business grows. So it's an investment in you, but as you grow, your business grows. Number 2, do it now. So the first one was ask the big question now. 2 is do it now. The greatest danger you face in this moment is the idea that you will make intentional growth a priority later. If you don't do it right now, it's never going to be important enough for you to do it. He says, this was really good. Later is one of those dream killers, one of the countless obstacles we put up to derail our chances of success. I thought that was pretty profound. By starting to read this book, you've already begun the process. And we're all on our personal growth journey. I know everybody here gets it. Number 3, face the fear factor. And he said, I recently read an article on the fears that keep people from being successful. The following 5 factors came into play. So fear of failure, right? Fear of trading security for the unknown. That's a big one for me. I don't know about you all, but some of you guys have other jobs, and there's going to come a point maybe where hopefully that your young living business is doing so well that you're going to be like, okay, do I stay in what's secure or do I go for it? Like, there's just always going to be a time for that. Fear of being overextended financially, which is very real. Fear of what others will say or think, and fear that success will alienate peers. So you might have all of these or some of these, but they're like real fears, and fear is real. Like, it's a real thing, but I'm going to tell you to do it anyway. You can do things and feel fear. That's okay. It's not that you're not ever supposed to feel afraid. It's that you do stuff even though you are afraid. And then it doesn't seem so scary anymore. So he asked the question, which I journaled this too, which of those fears most impacts you? Because it'll be different for everybody. So I looked at those and I thought, which one is the biggest one for me personally? And it's, I wrote out why, and I just kind of wrote my feelings about it. And he says, we all have fears, but here's the good news. We also all have faith. I love that. The question you have to ask yourself is, which emotion will I allow to be stronger? Your answer is important because the stronger emotion wins, whatever that is. I want to encourage you to feed your faith and starve your fear. I love that. I absolutely love that. That was probably my favorite thing that I read. Number 4 is change from accidental to intentional growth. So people tend to get in ruts in life. They get their groove. Everything's going easy. And sometimes you're just like satisfied, there for a little while. Excuse me. Even when it's taking them in the wrong direction. And I'm sure you've been there before, or somebody's there right now that like they're stuck in a rut and it's not a good one to be in. After a while, they just get by. If they learn something, it's because of a happy accident. The only difference this is profound. The only difference between a rut and a grave is the length. I was like, whoa, I had not thought about that. So he compares accidental growth to intentional growth. So accidental, you're planning to start tomorrow. Intentional growth, you insist on starting right now today. Accidental waits for growth to come, like you just think it's just going to come to you. Intentional takes complete responsibility to grow. You know that it's something you have to do. Accidental learns only from mistakes. Intentional often learns before mistakes. Accidental growth depends on good luck. Intentional relies on hard work. Accidental quits early and often. Intentional perseveres long and hard. Accidental falls into bad habits. Intentional fights for good habits, because sometimes you got to fight to get a good habit. Accidental talks big. Intentional follows through. They ain't just talking about it. Accidental plays it safe. Intentional takes risk. Accidental thinks like a victim. So victim mentality. Intentional thinks like a learner. Accidental relies on talent, while intentional relies on character. I really like that. And then the last one, accidental growth stops learning after graduation. I mean, and you're like, you have a whole life after that. You don't think you do when you're 19, but when you're 39 and you look back on it, you're like, wow, I've done a lot of living since high school. Intentional growth never stops growing. You realize that your whole life, you're going to learn till you die. So he gives a quote. Eleanor Roosevelt said, "One's philosophy is not best expressed in words. It is expressed in the choices one makes. In the long run, we shape our lives and we shape ourselves. The process never ends until we die, and the choices we make are ultimately our own responsibility." I thought that was really, really good. And he said, if you want to reach your potential and become the person you were created to be, which I'm big on that, you must do much more than just experience life and hope that you will learn what you need to along the way. You got to go out, basically, and make things happen. So then on page 14, he has questions, and I journaled these out. And it says applying the law. He gives the law, and then he does an application section at the end of each chapter. And so it says applying the law of intentionality to your life. So number 1 was, which of the gaps discussed in the chapter have caused you to neglect growing the way perhaps you could have? So you look at each of the ones we just talked about, and you look which is like the top one that you struggle with. Because once you identify it, then you can start to work on changing it and growth in that area. So that's what part of the next question is. What strategies can you create and implement to help you bridge the gap? So what can you do to get better in that area? And then, so I wrote all that out. And it's hard sometimes to look at, okay, well, this is really where I struggle, and this is what I need to do. But it gives you a really clear, you get very clear on it. And I think the more clear you get on it, then you can be more intentional about looking for things that are going to help you, because we all struggle in different areas. So it might be different for you than it is for me, and that's okay. We're on our own journeys. So number 2, it says most people underestimate the unimportance of nearly everything in their lives. They get distracted. As a result, they put growth on the back burner. And if they do grow, it happens accidentally instead of intentionally. Take a look at your calendar for the next 12 months. How much time do you have specifically scheduled for personal growth? So he's basically saying, to pencil it into your calendar or ink it into your calendar, to your planner, to your life. Rework your calendar so you have an appointment with yourself for personal growth. He says every day, 5 days a week, 50 weeks a year. I go for 5 to 6 days a week. Sometimes the weekends I really don't do much as far as personal growth, but now I have actually, because I kind of enjoy just turning my phone off and taking an hour to read a little extra on the weekends if we're not out doing stuff. I mean, sometimes you're out doing stuff, but 5 days a week is a pretty attainable goal. And then he says, you might say, what? I don't have time for that. Well, that's probably true, but you need to do it anyway. You have to make time for things. I get up in the morning. My routine is we get up and we have breakfast, and I do my Bible study. That's the first thing I do. I read my Bible, I pray, and then I do my personal development every morning. And I do it. If I don't do it then, it won't get done. And then I'll, get dressed and work out. And so, I've got a routine and a schedule. But if you don't make it a priority, it just won't get done. It's like everything else. You're going to have to make the time for it. If it's before bed, if that works better for you, whatever it is. I'm not a morning person, but I know that if I lay my Bible out and whatever book I'm reading for my personal growth or whatever it is I'm doing, if I have it all laid out where after I eat breakfast, I sit down, then I'm going to do it because it's right there. I'll put out my highlighter. I put out my journal and my ink pen. And so I don't have to think about anything, and I'm reading it as I'm waking up. But if you want to do it at night, do it at night. Whenever. You can do it at lunch, whatever works for you. He says, get up an hour early, stay up an hour later, give up your lunch, put in extra time on the weekends. Just make it work. If it's important to you, you make it happen. And number 3 was start now. You probably won't feel like doing it. Do it anyway. I just he's very to the point. So that is chapter 1 of the 15 Invaluable Laws of Growth. That's the first one of 15 that we're going to go through. And that was the law of intentionality, being intentional growth. So we'll do chapter 2 next week, which is the law of awareness. You must know yourself to grow yourself. And there's some questions in there that I implore you to take the time to write out your answers to, because I think that it's pretty interesting. You know, when you're asked like hard questions or things that make you kind of, I always say, there are questions that make me sweat because I'm like, I don't know. Like, I just don't have a simple answer for that. That's okay. Like, take some time and write it out. You know, see how you feel about it. And me personally, I will, if I don't know how I feel about something, or if like it's a question that's, I'm just like, I don't know for sure. I ask God to, I'm like, please show me, show me what this is. Like, show me what I should feel about this, or where you want me to go with this, because I ask the Lord to come in on everything for me, and that's helpful. Sometimes I give it some time so I can kind of see what God reveals to me, and then I'll get more clear. But some of these questions you'll be like, it's not going to be like a sentence answer. It's stuff you're going to have to think on. And I wrote mine out. I read mine back about a year ago. I read like 3/4 of this book, and I did a lot of journaling with it, and I'm going back now, and some of my answers have kind of expanded since even then, which is kind of exciting. So get a notebook, like a little cheapo notebook, and write these out. Read it one day and then journal the questions the next day, because we meet once a week, so you've got plenty of time to read the chapter. Some of y'all might be reading ahead. But that is all for tonight. Let me stop the recording, and then we can take any questions if you have any. Let me see. Make sure I stop it.